The Battlefield 6 beta is in its final day today, but it'll be back in just a few short days. To round out our first weekend of the beta, however, I want to take a bit of time to talk about a few things you may not have known so that you can try them out in the dying hours of weekend 1, but also keep it in mind for going into weekend 2. Some of these are nice to know, and maybe you didn't realize that they were a thing returning from past Battlefield games. Others may be brand new to you if you're trying out Battlefield 6 for the first time, but either way, there are a few things you could probably say, I wish I knew sooner in Battlefield 6. Drop your thoughts if there's anything you noticed, a small tip or trick. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video, and make sure to subscribe to stay up to date with all things Battlefield 6. I'd love to have in the community. We've got so much more on deck, and I'm excited to share it all with you. But for now, let's get into it. Let's start out with some combat and weaponry little details or tips. First, one big one that you should be aware of just for your general gameplay knowledge is that weapon bloom exists within Battlefield 6. This is subtle deviation in your shot placement when aiming down sight. So not all shots will land exactly where that middlemost pixel of your reticle is placed. This isn't so much noticeable up close within, say, 10 to 30 to 40 meters, but once you start shooting at longer and longer ranges, you'll definitely start to notice that you may not be getting as many hits as you thought you would. Now, you can kit weapons to mitigate against this. You can burst fire, tap fire to get a bit more precision on your shots, but it's going to be something that is ever present, so just keep that in mind. The weapon sling has a sort of quirk about it that you may have noticed as well. I highly recommend everyone try out each class within the beta, even if it may not be your cup of tea. I mean, it's a beta after all, no stats carry to the full game, so give it a shot, why not? But if you've played Assault, however, you may have noticed you feel like you've run out of ammo way faster than you should have, and even if you go so far as to compare your ammo reserves with the other class selections, you're going to notice significantly reduced amount of ammo for Assault. But why is that? If you're meant to be the front line and the spearhead of objective pushes, surely you should have more ammo if you can't carry supply packs, right? Well, according to David Sirland, this is actually because of the weapon sling, a conscious effort by the dev team distributing that total ammunition in reserve across your primary and your weapon that you have in your gadget slot. If you were to remove that in favor of another launcher, both explosive and incendiary, you'd end up seeing yourself back to a regular number of magazines in reserve to play around with, something more on par with the other class selections. So if you find yourself not necessarily using that weapon sling as much, though it is very beneficial, especially right now with those shotguns, maybe swap the weapon sling out for another launcher if you find that ammo to be a crucial part of your experience. Next, Suppression is another system that returns for better or for worse within Battlefield 6. This time though, Suppression pauses your automatic healing until after you get out of a gunfight. So if you feel like you're pinned down, but you're still just not gaining any health back, that'd be why. Not ideal, but at least you know the reasoning now because of it. Additionally, another combat mechanic is the sweet spot mechanic for sniping. This is returning from Battlefield 1, where what this mechanic does is that it allows for a sort of sweet spot for a one-hit kill, where you don't necessarily need to hit a headshot. It can be an upper body and chest shot, but it's in a sweet spot because it's only at a certain distance. The closer or further away you get from a target, the efficiency of that will drop off, meaning less damage. And one thing that you may not have noticed, or maybe noticed but wondered why it was the case, is the visualization of the sweet spot. It's a sort of rainbow lens flare look on the scope, where you have that regular scope glint at a far distance and very up close, but in that sweet spot, you're going to have that sort of starburst effect to it that will give you a bit of a notice of, hey, I'm a little bit more in danger than I may otherwise be, where this sniper doesn't have to hit a headshot. But you'll be able to see that difference in that scope glint and know that you're in that sweet spot, which is a nice little touch for a mechanic that may not necessarily be the most favorable or that people may like all that much. Let's stick with another sniper item here at this one, though. The rangefinder attachment is also something to be super beneficial. Within Battlefield 6, you have zeroing on your scope. Once again, you can do this manually to ranges of 100, 200, 300, 400, and 500 meters. Or you can end up using the rangefinder attachment, which will then allow you to zero into the exact position of what an enemy is at. So this will allow you to be able to place your crosshair on an enemy head at whatever distance and account for that bullet drop by zeroing it in. So it's definitely a nice thing to have and definitely something beneficial if you are a sniper, which right now there isn't that much of a con to going with this. Another attachment tip or thing you may have wished you knew a little sooner is soft point rounds. These are just, they're so worth it. On any weapon that has these, I kind of think you should run them because what they do is increase that headshot multiplier, and by quite a bit in a lot of cases. And the crazy part is there's no cons, plus you increase that headshot multiplier. The only thing that I think you could say is a con is that it usually costs about 30 points per attachment for that. So it is an expensive attachment, but it otherwise doesn't really have all that much that's detrimental to the build. And with a lot of the attachments we have right now only having 20 levels per weapon, it's honestly not like you're missing out on a ton with using something that takes 30 points. Now, when the full game comes out, and I'm expecting there to be even more attachments for each of these weapons, yeah, sure, you might have to sort of contend with a different build that may push you over that 100 limit, but right now, not at all. So give those a go, aim for the head, and see yourself getting even more kills. Another combat thing that you may have wished you knew a little sooner was there's a setting, I'm not even kidding, to make it look like you're almost cheating. If you've ever seen some of those crazy aimers on mouse and keys where they just absolutely flick to an enemy where it's just like, wow, that was actually impressive. This is kind of in the same vein as that, where you can end up doing this on mouse and keys, or better yet, on controller for players that otherwise would have no option to do this. This is the flick look setting, which allows you to quick 180 in your viewpoint, literally going from one side and immediately flipping behind you. So it's something that if you know there is an enemy that may be flanking you, but you're finishing up a gunfight right in front of you, you can end up tapping this and quickly getting ready for another gunfight. Now, it is going to completely 180 you, so you are still going to have to make those micro adjustments after the fact because the odds of them being directly behind you is relatively small, but it gives you a much faster and better chance to get in position for another gunfight. So check that out maybe and see if you can incorporate that into your gameplay. And the final thing in terms of combat we'll talk about here with things you may not have known, deal with a little bit of vehicle play. While I do enjoy playing in vehicles in Battlefield, I honestly often find myself not doing it nearly as much as maybe I should. But with Battlefield 6, if you're jumping into some vehicles and you may not necessarily be super accustomed to it, on tanks in particular, notice the health checkpoints. There are dots on the tank health bar that mark a sort of new max value that whenever any explosive, any incoming rounds, any RPGs, any incoming tank fire, whatever does damage to your tank, if it crosses below that threshold, you cannot naturally regenerate that health any higher than that. Instead, to end up getting back to a new max health, you'll end up having to have an engineer repair your vehicle or heading to a vehicle supply station that will then take a little bit of time to refuel, give you more ammunition, and of course, increase the health on your tank once again. Just bear that in mind that is one thing you have to keep an eye out for if you're going into tank combat, but otherwise, you're good. Now let's move over to some class-related items. One thing that you may have seen here along the battlefield is sort of weapons with their backpacks, satchels, and stuff like that. What is that in comparison to just picking up a weapon? Well, if you see that combination on a dead enemy, dead teammate, you're actually going to pick up their whole class, not just a weapon. So if you go over and quickly try and spam to pick up, you're going to change your entire loadout. Your entire way of playing the game will change mid-match and mid-life. Obviously, yes, you can redeploy and do this from the redeploy menu, but if you want to do this while still in the action, that's a way to do it. The adrenaline injector for assault also is something that a lot of people may be sort of taking a different way. If you jump in and think of it as, oh, it's the stim from Warzone or the stim from Modern Warfare 2019 or 2042, whatever the case, whatever you want to compare it to, it does not do the same thing. It does not bring your health back. It's a different mechanic now. Or partially. It's not going to immediately give you health regeneration. It does speed up the health regeneration and how quickly you can get back into that, but instantaneously starting health regeneration is not a core principle of the adrenaline injector. Instead, it's more so geared towards being a breaching tool and used for other situations. In similar situations where it'll clear your effects of grenades, stuns, and amplify footstep audio to make you a bit more hyper aware. So it's kind of a breaching tool in that sense rather than getting health back, which is something that I think is nice to know if you did not know, because in a pinch situation, you might think, oh, why did I not get my health back? Why'd I die? Because it doesn't do that anymore. As for some healing and revive tips for my support and medic players out there, or just trying to help out your squad mates, these are a combination of old tips for those who may be newer to Battlefield, mixed with some newer ones based on the new mechanics. Firstly, charging defibs now returns health to a higher state than that of just a quick single tap. Whether you hold it in for just a quick little second or you actually charge it up, that will depend on how much health you give back to your squad mate or teammate that you are reviving. Anywhere from a lower amount of health that they'll have to regen themselves or getting them all the way back up to 100 health. This is a classic feature, but returning in something first-time support medics may not realize. Another thing is that progress on your revive is kept if you have to dip out of a revive. Like if you're reviving a teammate and you end up seeing an enemy round the corner and you think, okay, I don't think I can stick this in time, you can dip out of that revive, get the kill, and then go right back in, and that progress will be saved. So that's a nice little touch, something that makes sense, but is nice to actually see in-game. And finally, requesting revive actually extends the downed period for those that didn't know. So this is something that right now by default you have to hold the request in, so you might not necessarily notice that. Like you might tap, I think it's E on mouse and keys by default, and then I want to say it's like X or square depending on what console controller you're playing on. But if you hold that, you'll end up noticing the timer is something that is actually way slower in terms of the countdown compared to if you just let it run out. This is something that can be a little irritating if you hold it, but if you set the option in your settings to toggle, you actually don't need to hold it. You just need to tap that button and it'll stay in that prolonged state until you tap it again to get out of it. One thing you may have wished you knew a little sooner that does not relate to class stuff, but instead relates to platforms is PlayStation actually has a few exclusives throughout this beta, and presumably because of that, maybe throughout Battlefield 6's entire full experience as well. But in the beta, we've already seen there's an exclusive skin that you can end up getting for playing on PlayStation and redeeming that. And they also have had double XP as of this weekend one of the beta, so allowing you to progress a little faster throughout your rank experience. Now, obviously, there is that rank cap of 20, so grand scheme of things, it doesn't make that big a deal for the beta, but it is interesting to consider for the future. And if you want to try and breeze through getting more weapons or anything like that, and you have a PlayStation, maybe playing on PlayStation isn't the worst idea. But anyways, to round out this video, we got one more tip in terms of a setting and also a fun little bit of trivia. The setting, the compass is off by default. A lot of players like to have the compass on their HUD to just give a little bit more awareness or make more accurate callouts perhaps whenever you're trying to spot enemies for your squad. This is off by default. To turn it on, go into settings, graphics, interface and HUD, advanced HUD settings, and then enable the compass from there, and it can be a beneficial setting to have in your in-game experience. And the final bit of little trivia to round this out with is the live feed on the spawn cameras, that over the shoulder. If I'm not mistaken, I remember talking to developers, I want to say it was back in April whenever I went and saw the game a little early. They had mentioned they wanted to bring back this feature, but if you didn't know, in past Battlefields with this, it was more of an estimation. It wasn't actually like the most up-to-date real-time thing, and so therefore you could spawn into some danger based off of what you saw off your teammates over the shoulder cam. But this was rebuilt with new tech so that what you see in that live feed is actually what your squad mate is seeing, what they're actually experiencing. So it's a real-time thing that is definitely a cool mechanic that can help give you a bit more information on maybe it's safe to spawn here or maybe it's not. But that said, that is where we're going to wrap it up. That's a few things I bet you could probably say, I wish I knew that a little sooner. So what do you think of this? Drop your thoughts down below. Is there anything you'd like to add to the list? Feel free to let me know. But if you guys enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Battlefield 6. I'd love to have you in the community. But for now, thanks so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. See you later. Take care and peace.